And guys, welcome to episode number 59 of Mac Yak. So we got a lot of episodes so far this time. So let me unhide. I'll make sure we got our audio set right. So it looks like we're all good. So say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
All right. So tonight's show's going to be kind of interesting. We really didn't prepare much for tonight, so it's going to be kind of an off the cuff thing. We've got several topics. We also picked two of you guys' topics. I know last week we said we were going to pick a topic and talk about it live, but we failed to do that. So Bruce wrote down all the topics, and so we picked two of them actually that we're going to talk about tonight. Only because we couldn't come up with any topics of our own. So
Yeah, we're lazy.
so we'll go with that story. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. All right. So,
And I have to say, I love this background that we're on.
oh, do you?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Really cool.
Yes, it is. It's the only one I had for 6 slots because Jay's not going to be here tonight. So I have to make one for like 3 to like 8 slots or something like that. So I always have a background I can always pick from when we are short a person or adding guests and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
all right, yeah, Jay is slacking, of course. All right, so first off, there goes my clock. So we're right on time. So, or it's a little late actually. So first thing up for tonight, I'm going to throw it over to Grudy, and he's got some. What was that?
That was my. I'm sorry. That's my text tone.
Yeah, you
I
turn
apologize.
it to quiet. That's what that little switch is for. You would think us as seasoned Mac Yackers would know how to use that stuff. But anyways, we're going to throw it over to Grudy, who's got some news of his own to share tonight. So take it away, Grudy.
Which news is
The
that?
sad news.
Sad news. Okay. Yeah, because we have 2 sections of the news tonight. Um, this week's been really, really bad for me. I've lost 2 really close people to me. Yesterday, last night, my great uncle, Joe, died. He was the last known survivor of the Bonus Army March in the early 30s. He was a World War II vet and a Korean vet. One of the most intelligent, nicest people that I've ever known. Very great man. So I just wanted to put out there that I love him and I love the family, and we're going to get through it. He died at 97 and a half, so he had a good long life. But love you, Uncle Joe. And then earlier this week, see, I live in the middle of nowhere, but I live at the head of a holler, and we were the first people to move up here that weren't part of the family in the holler. Very long, extended family lives up here, and they welcomed us by inviting us to the family reunion when we moved in. And this was before I was born, so I was always part of the family. And we went to the family reunion every year. And one of the family members happened to be, his name was Ramey Barker. Ramey was the right-hand man to the Senate president and then eventually the governor, same guy. Earl Ray, who also happens to be from my hometown. And he ended up retiring and becoming the mayor of my hometown. And I spent a lot of fun days with Ramey. He was a very good man and an asset to Southern West Virginia in general. Everyone, it's been all over the news and stuff. I just want to send a shout out to the Barker family and say I'm so sorry. it's been a rough week for me, guys. So yeah. Anyway, guys, so let's get going, I guess.
All right. Well, sorry to hear that there, Grudy. But yeah, we're just remember our prayers with you and your family there. So,
Yeah, thank you.
all right. So, anything else besides before we move on?
I'm good.
All right. Just to let Rocky and Mike know, you guys, I had to mute you because I thought you guys had the audio coming through. So go ahead and unmute yourselves. But I think it was Grudy. It sounded like a washing machine in the background or something.
Oh yeah, that's my girlfriend playing some dancing game.
That's when
Oh.
you mute yourself.
Yeah.
well, she
Okay.
stands
Rudy will be
right
muted
above
for the
me.
rest of the
I love
podcast.
how you blame it on nuts.
I was trying. I was doing it. I was doing a systematic process of elimination, and it
You
stopped.
should just start with Grudy next
Well,
time.
it stopped as soon as I did Mike, and then it came back again. So
Yeah, at least it's not the dogs barking this time.
yeah. So Grudy, you're gonna have to mute and then unmute when you need to talk. So because
Of course.
it's really distorting the audio.
Yeah. All right.
It sounded like because Steve had it right. It sounded like a washing machine.
Because I think it's like the noise cancellation was like trying to like stop it.
Yeah.
And it just like was you know. It
Oh
was
yeah.
bad.
So all right. So first bit of news tonight, because this is our new format. We're going to go with the news first, and then we go to our topics. So our first bit of news tonight is the Pismo turns 20. So who wants to take that one?
Ooh, me.
Oh,
I love the Pismo. It's the greatest portable Mac I think ever made. So expandable. Apple really should try to make something like that again one day because it's just an amazing system, and my G4 Pismo is amazing. Okay, go on.
yeah. Just make sure you mute yourself afterwards, because yeah,
Yeah.
that was bad. All right. So
Someone's throwing Pismos upstairs. That's
So
what
what about? I'm pretty sure Bruce and Steve, you probably use these too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you guys got to say about the Pismo?
Well, Bruce will go first, and I'll probably repeat everything he says.
No, I'll let you go first, Steve.
So the Pismo is cool. I didn't have one when they were new, obviously. But with the bronze keyboard, that's the one we're talking about, right, Rudy? You just nod. You don't have to unmute yourself. Okay. Yeah. So the one with the bronze keyboard, I remember seeing at a demo floor, like a CompUSA, Circuit City computer store, like a demo floor. And I remember seeing that and being like, "Oh, cool!" But of course, everybody who was at the at that store, the kids or the people passing by, were taking the keys off of the keyboard. So my first impression of it was like, wow, that's a cool keyboard. Why are there like 5 keys missing? And I remember like someone remarking like, oh, these keyboards are not that durable. Well, it's like people are pulling at the damn things. I don't even think they were on. I think they were just like floor models that didn't turn on or whatever. But I think it was a pretty cool machine. Had FireWire built in, which was really cool. I think it was also the first PowerBook that had Airport in it. So I didn't have one when it came out, but I have one in my collection. I actually got it with a busted screen and a busted keyboard. And back in the day on eBay, I paid like probably $20-$30 for each part, and I made myself a working one. But it was a pretty neat machine.
Oh,
I don't know if my
His
oh,
G-
I was
There you go.
lost sound there for a
Yeah,
second.
Oh,
you
is
were
someone
muted.
more talk?
We were watching it.
okay.
I was gonna
I'm
say.
tired. Mike, I was saying, Mike, what do you have to say about it? And your audio is muted, Mike, so you might want to unmute.
I have no idea. I've never seen one, never used one, never touched one.
Okay.
You probably touched one at my house and you forgot about it.
Oh, I
sucks
didn't
is-
actually.
I'm
What
kidding.
sucks is Jay could have a lot to say about the Pismo because it's the only Mac notebook that he really likes, and it's what he types on anytime he needs to type something up for his blog.
That's cool.
We got a guy in there who says, "Do the dysfunctional wombat says, do the Pismos have the light up app logos?"
I don't think so.
He says, "I know the Wall
do?
Streets didn't."
Yeah, they do. They do. They started that with the Lombard, and I think the late Wall Streets actually had them too. But it was really late in the run for the Wall Street, from what I can tell. The Lombards have them. The Pismos have them. So yeah.
Weren't there mods for the other ones to have that going back in the G3 line?
Yeah, because the logo's still translucent, so you can still stick a light back there and make it glow.
Wow. All right. So, any other questions? I'm trying to read the. Yeah. Oh, by the way, Starbuck Texas. Mike's head is cut off. He needs to adjust his camera, which he does.
That's how he looks now. That's
Yeah.
all.
So, Mike, you might want to adjust your camera.
He's back. Oh, there he goes again. Giving you the side eye.
I guess Mike wants to be cut off tonight. So.
That's okay.
You're lucky I even showed up.
Oh,
Are we though?
Yeah.
We are privileged.
Yes, we are. All right.
Of course.
All right. Next bit of news, and I'll go back to Grudy again. This is yours.
Jeez, this is the Grudy show.
Hey
What?
guys, I adopted another dog.
how are we not surprised?
Okay, so now he has a problem collecting Macs, and he has a problem collecting dogs.
Oh,
Isn't he cute?
very cute.
He is cute.
He's the neighborhood stray. He's been on the holler for years now. And people just randomly feed him, but they don't really take care of him. And he came up here after my husky went into heat and never left. So he sleeps in my garage now, and I'm getting him fixed Wednesday. So,
Okay.
Oh, you don't want puppies?
oh, I don't want puppies. He's like 3 or 4 years old. We're not really sure exactly how old he is, but we think he's a full-blooded coonhound. Very beautiful dog.
All right. So if you guys got any dogs you want to get rid of, just talk to Grudy. He'll take them.
I don't need any more.
Hey, and if you put an
Talk to
apple
Grudy.
collar on him, he'll really take him if you put an apple collar on there.
Yeah. Hey, I bet you if I put like a clamshell to him, strapped to him, I bet you'll take him.
Yeah, I think a lot of us would.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
That is true. All right, so let's go ahead and start working into our first topics, because I know once we get into these topics, this is where we take a lot of our time here. In fact, you can hear a jet plane in the background because I live right near Dulles Airport. So,
And he complains about the washing machine in my background.
Worst
Yeah.
airport I've ever been to.
so all right. So first one, and this is a topic we tried to talk about. I think the last 2 episodes, and we kept pushing it back and pushing back. Steve Jobs, was he overrated? Was he an innovator, or was he just a tyrant? I'll go ahead and start off on it. My look on it is that he was a good businessman. He knew how to. He was a good salesman. He knew how to sell something. Okay, you had Steve Wozniak, who invented the Apple I, and Steve
And
saw.
2.
Well, I understand that, but he started out. I mean, that's how Apple started, was the Apple I. But
Yeah.
Steve Jobs saw something that they could potentially make money off of. Okay, Steve Wozniak didn't. Okay, so you had 2 different opposites right there in the company. But as far as him being an innovator, I don't think it was so much Steve as being the innovator. I think he pushed other people to actually become innovators. Because, for instance, when he was on the Macintosh team, from what I've read and stuff, he basically didn't. I don't think he did really anything at work as far as putting anything into the Mac, except for telling people what he wanted it to do. Okay.
But don't confuse inventor with innovator.
Exactly.
Okay, Steve Jobs was not an inventor. Okay,
No.
we know that
Oh,
for
yeah.
sure. But I still believe he was an innovator, whether that be through him working through other talented people. I still believe that he was finding innovations and making them a reality.
Well,
as you say, with the assistance of clever people.
I think he was
Yeah.
also stealing a lot of those innovations.
Yeah.
Okay, because if you look at a lot of the things that Apple did, especially in the Macintosh. Okay, a lot of that stuff was stolen from Xerox. Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
he even
Yeah.
eventually admitted that he got the ideas from it.
well,
Totally, but here is another thing. If you look at the what was it, the Xerox? Well, someone can remind me what that computer was called. The
Alto.
I thought it was
Alto.
called the
Xerox
Lisa.
The
Yeah,
Alto.
the Alto. The Alto itself, the operating system, was so far from what the Mac became. Okay, yep, it had floating windows, it had menus, it had a mouse, it had a cursor. It also had a huge book full of key commands. This was not a computer like the Macintosh. And it was one of the things that Steve Jobs said after going and seeing the demonstration. He came back and he said, this thing was incredible, but they'd done a whole bunch of stuff wrong. And so, yes, absolutely took the idea, took the concept, but saw the potential of that idea if you get it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and he saw the potential of what they had and what they didn't know they had. And yes, Apple and Steve Jobs especially would take ideas from people and, they would take it and then put their spin on it. It's kind of like saying, well, they didn't invent the car, but they made it better. And that's sort of what Apple's always been doing, and I think that one thing that I heard about, people who worked with him, which always resonated with me, was he would push for his idea. And the minute he heard a better one, he would shut up on his idea, and all of a sudden he would adopt the best one. Because he, of course, he had a huge ego to himself. But once he knew he was beat, and once he saw that was the better idea, he'd completely forget. He'd change tracks, and he'd go forward in that.
Yeah.
And exactly what his quotation that he always attributed. Good artists copy, great artists steal. Was pretty much his mantra, I'd say, through the early days of Apple.
yeah,
Well, and a great example of how he was an innovator. And honestly, almost every innovator in history is somebody who takes a conglomeration of great ideas and helps culminate them into something better that changes the world. Let's look at the iPhone.
Yeah.
And that was nothing new. I mean, there had been devices that had touch screens, multi-touch. Everything about the iPhone had already been done, but it had never been done in one package. And an innovator led everything to come together as that one package. And I think that's where Steve Jobs shined. And it was proven when he was with the company, and then he left Apple, and you saw where that went. And then he came back, and you saw what he did again. So he drove innovation. That was his main, what he did for the company, what he did for the world.
and I totally agree with you on that, Rocky. However, okay, one of the biggest reasons why he had to leave the company or got fired pretty much was basically because he was using more money to realize those dreams, which was fine, but they weren't bringing in the money they needed to stay afloat. And
he always believed the Mac was selling better than it really was.
Exactly. And he wanted the Mac to be a computer that normal people could afford, but yet the cost to produce it was just not there at the time.
Yeah, it just kept ballooning. The specs started off fairly modest and just went up, and that's why it ballooned.
Yeah, and he was not, or he, like Bruce just said, he was not a businessman in that sense of knowing what he could and couldn't do, and that's one of the biggest reasons why he butted heads with the board of directors and pretty much got ousted out of the company.
And interestingly enough, when he then did go and leave, and obviously he started up Next and Pixar and all that sort of thing, he, I think, became a far better businessman during that time. Mm-hmm. So by the time he came back, he had, I think, two things that he had acquired over that time away. Number one was he had acquired a little bit of humility. Still not as much as normal people, but a little bit more than he had before. But he had also acquired a lot more business nous. Now, I always have this sort of idea, because John Scully, I think, when he was interviewed about getting rid of Jobs, said that ultimately he regretted the decision, because as big a problem as as Steve Jobs was, he was the founder of the company,
and the heart
he'd
of
underestimated
the company.
he'd underestimated the value of a founder for a company. But of course, had things changed, had he stayed on, would he have progressed to become the person he became when he came back?
I don't think so. I think Apple.
I don't think so
I
either.
think Apple would have went bankrupt, and we would not have anything that we see today, Apple-wise, because, like we just said, the Mac was at the time. You know, it's a not a failure now, but technically it was pretty much a failure at the time. A lot of people weren't wanting it because it was expensive. Windows copied the Mac OS, you know, and pretty much came out with their own Windows operating system. So PCs were a lot cheaper to buy, so more people were buying those. And Windows could do the same things.
Let's not forget expandability.
Yes.
Because they had, unlike the Apple II series, Macintosh was completely closed. No expansion slots, no way to officially upgrade the memory or anything. And people thought that was a huge drawback. And that's why when the Macintosh Plus finally came out and there was expandable memory, people started to change their mind about the Macintosh. But, you know, those first two models, like, they were laughed at because what personal computer isn't one that a hobbyist can go in and open up and rip apart? Because it was not a hobbyist computer. It was a computer that you didn't have to tinker with.
Yeah.
And it was a completely different thing for the time.
Well,
Yes, it was meant to be sort of a piece of consumer level electronics, like a TV or a washing machine or something like that. Why would you open it? You don't open those things, so you don't open this. I mean, it wasn't until the Mac found its footing in the design market, became like it found its niche ultimately, or niche, I should say.
Basically.
And of course that all of that ended up happening after Jobs was gone. I mean, all of the when it really became the graphic designer's choice, and that, as I say, that was all after Jobs was gone.
yeah, pretty much, and that's basically what kept. A lot of people sit there and say the Apple II is actually what kept Apple afloat during the job years. I mean, because Apple II sold longer than any other computer I think ever. I forget how long it sold for.
The series was from 77
1978 to 1991.
Yeah,
1993 if you count the Apple IIe card.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
True, but that's
True.
that. But it does,
It's
the Apple II is the
II in
only.
its core.
Didn't they
It's the only
technically
reason
extend it
Apple
to
exists today.
95, I thought? The
I
card?
think it was 93.
yeah. So,
No, but
well, no, go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, I said, but the Apple II is a far superior product to the original Macintosh anyway.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
So that's why people weren't buying the Mac, because the Apple II was better anyway. And the Apple II GS, and truthfully,
2GS was
if
incredible.
they would have crippled the 2GS like they did, we wouldn't even be using Macs today. We'd probably be using derivatives of the Apple II
well,
GS.
okay,
That thing would blow away a Mac in every way, shape, or form in 1986.
yeah, and
Color, sound, etc.
and I think
there's a reason
that's-
those
for the
machines
speed.
lasted for 17 years.
And I think that was one of the biggest reasons why Steve Jobs crippled it, because he didn't want it to cut into Mac sales, because it was a far
That's
superior
exactly the
machine.
reason why.
Yeah.
It wasn't Steve Jobs' total decision to cripple the Apple II GS. It was an executive decision because Steve Jobs wasted so much money on the Mac, they had to recoup that money. So therefore, they couldn't have the 2GS, which, by the way, was $1,500 cheaper, eaten into Macintosh sales because they wanted to get their damn money back.
Yep.
Yeah, the 2E was discontinued in November 1993 with the 2GS in December 92 and the 2E card in October 93. So from 77 to 93. Isn't that insane?
Yeah.
So
But
now,
I mean, even just coming
That's
back to the whole
longest
Jobs
run of
thing with
any
the Apple
8-bit
IIs.
computer in existence.
go ahead, Bruce.
I mean, if you look at the Apple One, obviously a hobbyist board, you build your own case. I mean, Jobs was the one that said, when we bring out the next one, we're going to put it in this beautiful plastic case, make it look really nice on people's desks, that sort of thing. And that was the sort of ultimately the start of that, getting something that is good and making it better.
Yep.
Wouldn't have worried about putting it in a really fancy looking case,
No.
but Jobs knew that if he was going to sell that to lots and lots of people, He had to make it look like a nice piece of consumer electronics.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody's ever seen the movie Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Yes.
But
Haven't
in
seen
that
it yet.
movie, you need to watch it because it's really good. Noah Wiley plays Steve Jobs, and Anthony Michael Hall plays what's his
other
name? The Microsoft dude.
Wozniak.
No.
Steve Ballmer.
No, not
No,
Steve
no,
Ballmer.
Gates.
Gates.
Steve
Yeah,
Ballmer?
Bill Gates. No.
Steve Ballmer's in there.
Yeah.
But it basically goes with kind of like Wozniak and Steve Ballmer telling the story of the two different companies and how they rose up and everything. But there's one little part in there that the reason why I say this is because when he's selling or delivering the Apple ones to that the Byte shop, I think it was. The guy was like, he was expecting it to be a whole computer, not a board. And so he said, I want it, computers and stuff. So Steve was like, well, you got all this stuff in here. You could sell it with it, And so that's when he came up with the idea of basically, we need to build something that's all in one and ready to go. Because that
Yeah,
guy
as compared to
gave,
what-
like Bruce just said, he took something that somebody had and did it better. Now,
I have to say that movie is one of the best depictions of that story, and I really wish they would have just, because it cuts off, after he leaves Apple and such like that. I really wish they would have just picked that up and made like another one.
yeah.
But if you haven't seen it, sorry to put
I-
it, but if you haven't seen it, go.
I think
find
I've watched it
That's-
5 or 6 times myself. So
Yeah.
And look, while we're doing that, I don't know if anyone has ever seen the 3-part documentary by Robert X. Cridgley called Triumph of the Nerds,
yes,
based on Accidental
I've seen
Empires, the book.
that is a good one.
Yeah, so Accidental Empires is a book that Robert X. Cridgley wrote about the start of the personal computer industry. It's a fantastic read. I mean, it finishes at about 1995, so obviously I think around about then when Apple was really not doing well. So obviously there's a lot more story to tell after this book, but it's still a really good read about the start of the personal computer industry. And then from that book, he then made a 3-part series, 3-hour-long episodes called Triumph of the Nerds. And if you're interested in the start of the personal computer industry, it's fantastic. I've seen it a million times.
I've seen it a few times too myself. So it is a really good because there is some Steve Jobs interviews in there.
Yep.
There's also some Bill Gates interviews. I mean, he goes through all the different, the two companies as they grew, because basically it was Apple and Microsoft coming up together around the same time. It just so happens that Microsoft won out, I guess the software war there, because they just had an operating system would run on just about anything, whereas Apple only
Yeah.
would sell it for their own computers.
But I would say the reality is, okay, let's say the legacy of what he's done. Because honestly, if you look at it, here's the evidence of what Jobs has done. Okay, because he founded the Macintosh and he helped to innovate that forward, and it was copied by the lazy man Bill Gates. And he admits that. Bill Gates is the one who openly admits that he prefers lazy over hardworking because XYZ. Steve Jobs was the opposite, hardworking over lazy. And as a result, Steve Jobs innovated. Microsoft copied. And then he left the company. Apple continued the operating system and everything else that he founded. Apple continued that and then brought him back. And when they brought him back, he then innovated again. And he continued to move them forward. Apple would not be sitting on over $1 billion of cash. Oh, well, wait a minute.
Trillion.
Isn't like 100 billion right now?
Trillion.
Trillion.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, literal like cash in the bank. They just got sitting there doing nothing, and they wouldn't have that if it weren't for the innovations that Steve Jobs made when he had his time at Apple.
Oh, I think that only happened, and here's the thing. Here's a little fun fact about that too. If it wasn't for Microsoft, Apple probably wouldn't be around, because Microsoft actually put a lot of money into Apple.
150 million.
Yeah, only, and this is, and here's a little fun fact too. The reason why they did it is because at the time Microsoft was actually being investigated by the Department of Justice for.
They did not want to be a monopoly.
Exactly. They wanted to prop Apple up to make it look like, hey, we are not a monopoly. So
Yeah.
a lot of people don't understand that. Now Apple is bigger than Microsoft, because once Bill Gates came back and basically buried the axe with Bill Gates.
Bill Gates came back. To
I'm
bury
sorry.
the actual Bill
Sorry,
Gates.
Steve Jobs. When Steve Jobs came back to bury the hatchet with Bill Gates, it basically, that's where the company took off again, I think. Because there was so much infighting, and a lot of Apple fanboys hated Microsoft, blah blah blah, and vice versa. But I think that's where it started again, because Microsoft, with that investment, that's how we got Internet Explorer on. Guess what? Mac OS. But Steve Jobs was smart and put a lot of stipulations in there to keep Microsoft out of Apple. Okay, so once Microsoft got all their money back, basically Apple could probably buy over Microsoft, right now. So if they wanted to, I don't think they would ever do it, but
Interesting, wouldn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, I actually did a paper on what if Apple took over Microsoft in like high school. I said they name it Macrosoft or something like that.
Hey, wait, they've already got a Macrosoft.
So-
that already
Yeah,
exists.
so
All right. So we talked about Steve Jobs, the innovator, but in this slide, was he a tyrant too? Because he had a style of how he liked people to do things. It was like his way or the highway. And if you didn't do it the way he wanted, he would basically yell and scream. I've read
What?
stories of employees saying that he came in there yelling at them, and
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
think he
think
was a
that's-
flawed human being. I don't
Yeah.
think there's much doubt.
Yeah, and I agree with what Bruce is saying, and I think just like any person has their flaws, which I 100% agree with. I think that definitely was one of his. I mean, everybody has their quirks. You walk into a development department, you're going to see their quirks. You walk into an IT department, you're going to see their quirks. Everybody's got their quirks, and that was definitely one of his. I mean, he was at the top, and he knew what he wanted, and he went for it. And unfortunately, that also meant stepping on everybody else around him.
well, the story like goes when he came back to Apple. People would avoid going to and getting into the elevator. They'd take the stairs because they knew if Jobs walked into the elevator, he'd start quizzing them. What's
Yep.
your job? What do you do? What's this? What's that? And by the time they got to the next floor, everyone in the elevator would be fired.
Yeah, he's like, oh, that sucked, or blah blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But apparently, he still had an incredible power to rally people behind him, to rally people behind a cause,
Yeah.
to get the best out of them, encourage them to, give that little bit extra, that sort of thing.
Well-
Now, of course, you can't do that. People can't do that unless they are charismatic, unless they are the sort of person that does pull those people together.
And I agree with you on that, because when he left to go to Next and found it Next, he pulled a lot of the Macintosh team over with him,
Oh yeah.
to Next. So
Well, heck, we can go all day long on comparing the keynotes that Steve Jobs led versus,
oh
his
God, Tim Cook.
successor.
Well, that actually, we should make that another topic for another time. The difference between Steve Jobs and Tim Cook and their leadership styles. I mean, because it's like total opposite. I think both of them are 180 degrees from each other. So, he was. I have to agree, he was a tyrant, but I think he had to be sometimes to get stuff done, because, like you said, we wouldn't have the Mac today if it wasn't for Steve Jobs pushing and for the fonts, the graphical user interface, all that stuff, the constant pushing he did on his team to get that done. I don't think we would have it today, because they probably would have killed it if it took way longer than what it did. you know, for the amount of time they had and the work they did on it, I think they did a pretty good job. All right, so we got any other comments on Steve Jobs before we move on?
I'm happy to talk about the beginning of the personal computer industry all day, but we probably need to move on.
Yeah.
You and me both.
All right. So we're talking about.
I just want to recommend a book, Fire in the Valley. Just look it up. It's a good book.
Okay. So we're talking about all these old Macs. Now, a lot of old Macs break down, okay? And even Bruce or Steve can't fix them, okay? I'm sorry, but there's just some Macs that you can't fix. I mean, I've seen some boards where the corrosion, I mean, it's just ate through the whole board. It's like, nope, it's not going to work anymore. So the question we got for you guys in the audience tonight is, what do you do with the old Macs? I mean, because a lot of them are just beautiful pieces of art sometimes too, I think. Especially like the iMac G3s, the G5, you know, the Power Mac G5 was, the case was an awesome case. So what do you guys do with that stuff once it's no longer functional?
Well, what I do is there's no way in hell I can get it to work, I just repurpose it or make it as some kind of display piece. Like my dad's Macintosh Plus, I'm not touching it again. I'm not going to break it any worse than I have in the past. It's a display piece now. And for instance, before I was really a Mac person, you know, I made an iMac lamp, you know. You can repurpose them and still make them functional just for a whole different reason and purpose. And, you know, and once again, like I said, they make nice art too.
Yeah. In fact, I think if you ever look at Linus Tech Tips, he actually has a lamp made from a iMac G4.
Yeah, because MKD or Marcus Brownlee.
Yeah.
Marcus Brownlee, he redesigned all of Linus's office in one episode. It was quite funny.
Yeah. But I've seen it in a bunch of his videos now, that lamp he's got. That's the
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get rid of it.
Yeah. So, but I see a lot of people take like the G3s, the iMac G3s, and make like fish tanks or make cat beds. What is going on? That must be Mike.
Sorry, I'm getting a beer.
Oh,
Fair enough.
we're like,
This is all driving me to drink.
I'm already 4 shots in, so.
yeah. So, what other things do you guys do to repurpose? I mean, I see Jay has the side plates of a like iMac or a Power Mac G5s on his wall. He uses that as a display piece, you know.
Yeah.
I like the G3 and G4 side cases, honestly. That's my preference. I like the way they look. And I think it is neat when people repurpose them. Yeah, I know. And I repurpose them. You know, I think it's really cool to see people make fish tanks out of them, stuff like that. And I love when somebody will take a dead one. Don't get me wrong. You take a live one, you might as well be hung and, you know, cord.
Yeah.
But
We'll do it for you.
yeah. So yeah, I think it's great when somebody takes a dead G5 or G4 or anything and modifies it to actually be, whether it be a Hackintosh or some other, they repurpose it. I mean, I remember when the monitor died in the G3 and I was looking up all these people, they would take 1U little racks and they would shove it was a special custom case that I don't think they make them anymore, but it was like 1-2U little rack unit, and you would take an iMac G3 board and you would mount it in there with the power supply and everything else, and you would hook a external monitor to it, and it was great. It had fans. It was wonderful. It kept it alive when that stupid monitor burned out and died.
Dysfunctional Wombat says he personally will never make a Mac anything other than a Mac. No putting a PC in a G5 case, no fish tanks. I will be caught dead before I ever do anything like that. I rebuild, not repurpose. Well, I actually have a Mac Pro 1,1 case. I gutted it out because, you know, I sold most of the parts off and everything. In fact, Mike has most of my sleds from it. I think he has all 4 sleds from it and all the memory from it. And I think the actual memory trays, too, if I remember right. But anyways, one of these days I'm going to do something with that. I'm going to make it a Hackintosh or something. But Linus Tech Tips actually has a new video out where he actually made a Mac Pro out of a G5 case. Now, the one thing that really I squeamish at is he drills.
It's super janky right now.
Is where he put a big hole where the Apple logo is, so he could run a cable through that hole.
Well, no, he put the hole there because he wants to put illuminated LTT symbol there, but currently there's nowhere to run the power cable, so that's where it's running through.
Yeah.
Which Mac Pro did he put in the G5?
Oh, no, he made it a Hackintosh.
I was about to say, putting a Mac Pro Classic in a G5 case makes absolutely no sense.
No. What he did is he wanted to see if he could create a Mac Pro
before the new Mac Pro came out.
Before the new Mac Pro came out.
Didn't happen.
Yeah, so basically the new Mac Pro came out before he finished it, so they kind of had to make a video, and it's like, we had to make this video since we already went so far.
Yeah.
And yeah, Greg's right, it is janky. It is
very janky right now.
I've spoken to them before and about like making an old Mac case and putting a PC in it. Somebody locally was selling 2 towers, and those are the 2 towers I actually have behind me here. Well, I can't see it. But one's a blue and white, and one's a Quicksilver. Quicksilver. And unfortunately, the guy thought that he was going to put a PC in there. Him and his friend were going to put a PC in there, and his friend was taking the board out of the Quicksilver and managed to crack a piece off of it. So they threw out all the parts, but they didn't change the photo in their listing, and I bought 2 cases, which I thought were going to have stuff in it. Thankfully, I noticed before I paid the guy. But, if you're going to take something that's working perfectly fine and rip it apart, at least do it carefully. This was just lazy.
Yeah.
Just ripping things off and breaking it. Now, Mike gave me an old G5 case, and there's nothing in it. It's just the case. And it's a little beat up and such, but it's like, okay, I could do something with that. I have no problem doing anything with that because it's just a part. There's nothing working in it. Like if I don't know, like I might not do that with some of the other parts I have. Like I have a complete iMac G3 lime green case, just the case, no parts. Somebody shipped me a case like 15 years ago. I won't do anything with that probably than just like put it on display. I'm not going to like break the parts off or hack it or anything, but that's because it's probably a little more fragile. It's probably my only hesitation.
But that iMac G4 back there, as long as it's working, it's staying as a iMac G4. Yep. I've got 2 power books right here. I have a titanium and the 17-inch iMac G4s, or not iMac, PowerBook G4. Those will stay as what they are until they break, or I no longer can use them. But that's just me. But I'm kind of like Dysfunctional Wombat, but I would not have a problem making a PC into a, Mac Pro case or something like that that's no longer functioning, because it's a case and it's a beautifully designed case.
So coming at it from a perspective as someone who repairs these things, anytime I have something that is not working, let's just say I've got a computer that's completely and totally dead, for me that's parts. I'll look at it this sort of way. Grudy has not had the best luck with G5s of late and their transport. And what I always think to myself is, let's just say, for argument's sake, I had one of those G5s. Now, admittedly, I'm in another country, but imagine I wasn't. But let's say I had one of those G5s and the board was completely fried, cooked, power supply's dead, gone, whatever. And I look at it and I think, it's just an empty case. I can do anything I want to it. And there would be Grudy over there going, oh, can I have that case? Because my case is smashed to, sort of to all buggery. So I think that I don't really object to people doing these things to their computers, but I always just think of someone when they say, oh, it's just an empty shell, I'm going to turn it into a cat bed. I always imagine some other guy somewhere who's got a smashed shell and perfectly good in it. And I sort of think, can we just get those two together and then we end up with a good computer?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've done that. I got a speaker off of that G3 case that I got. The speaker in another G3 blue and white was completely trashed. So I just swap the part. Works fine.
And it's funny you mentioned that, Bruce, because the two G5s that I've got smashed in the mail in the last few weeks, I literally cannot find a replacement case for them because it was a one model specific case, and you can't stick the parts in any other case.
So how would you feel about someone with one of those cases?
Exactly.
Who turned it into a hackathon?
Oh, man. Rudy would have a heart attack.
All right, so I'm reading some of the comments here. Dysfunctional Wombat said, I saw someone put a G4 Mini in a TAM a long time ago. That's a horrific sight. Yes.
Oh yeah, that's actually I think still online. I saw it a few months ago.
That's horrible.
That's like somebody should go out and shoot that person, you know.
Yeah.
Well, in their defense, it was like I think it was 2008 when the guy did it, and back then the TAMs were worthless. So.
Yeah, but I bet he's kicking himself.
But they weren't worth as much as they do now.
Yeah,
he's
probably kicking himself now.
Yeah, he's kicking himself. You know, just like probably the third founder of Apple's kicking himself for like getting out before they became, you know, as successful as they did.
He's a nice guy because he responded to my letter. So
yeah, and to this day he still does not use technology. He's just
he was gifted an iPad 2, but he does not use it.
yeah.
So I'm reading some other chats here. So blind PC guy, I still love my 5.1 Pro. It's my main system, and that's pretty much my main system. Is my 4.1 here.
Mine too.
Is basically what I'm actually doing this show on. That's how powerful this system is. And when I tell people that I still use a 2009 machine daily in today's age, they look at me like, you're still using a 11-year-old machine?
That's ancient.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what they always say.
Yeah. And I tell them, I'm like, it's even funnier when I tell them that I sold my 2017 iMac because this was more powerful than my 2017. You know, and they can't believe it. They're like, how is that possible? I'm like, because
people always think newer is better.
Yeah. Well,
exactly.
That, and I tell them, I said, well, the Mac Pro has, 12 cores versus the 4 cores I had in my iMac. So you do the math on that. You know. So
plus you got 24 threads versus the 8 threads.
Yep. So, I mean, the Geekbench scores were just, it just trounced on multi-core, it trounced my 2017. However, on single core, my 2017 actually did way better than my 4.1. But, but as far as other repurposing, I have a 2009 sitting over here, iMac, and I keep it because, one, it has a DVD drive on it. So whenever I need something, I need to burn a CD or DVD, I have that. But also I have my Mac Pro for that too. But because I have an older operating system, I have a 32-bit operating system. Well, it's not 30, it's 64-bit, but it does run 32-bit software on it. So I have that still to run that because Catalina, of course, doesn't run it anymore.
Yeah.
So I have that. And then I have my G5 back here, which I will never get rid of because I use it to play Unreal Tournament. So
same here.
A lot of people, there was a video. In fact, I know we weren't going to talk about this, but I want to talk about it a little bit. The guy basically said that PowerPCs are dead in 2020.
Speaking of that, I did the response video to it. I just haven't finished editing it. That should be up the next few days.
So I highly disagreed with them because we've had our PowerPC challenges here on MacYac for 2 years now, and people can still use a PowerPC as a daily driver if needed. you can't do a lot of modern stuff like YouTube, Facebook, power hungry, websites today that are just stupid. Because they're so stupidly coded that they don't
And
run.
yeah,
Not
I
that
still
they're
do
power
it.
hungry. It's just that the applications and things that are required in the back end to run them are not meant for that platform.
Plus, 10.4 Fox probably converts a lot of code to PowerPC, which slows everything down.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, I found that when I was using my G5 for that challenge, I was actually, first of all, amazed at just how zippy it was. So,
Yeah.
when I was running, the operating system of that time and the software of that time, I was able to do
Oh, yeah.
almost everything. What I missed, there were two things I missed. One was, of course, web use, because the web on it was just painful. And the other was cloud stuff. I do a lot of cloud-based stuff in terms of storage and sharing data between devices and all that. And of course, as soon as I sat down at that computer, I was cut off from all that stuff. But most of the other things, yeah, I could do
Be right back,
jobs the same. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Here's the thing. I think here's the gist of this topic is basically if you have a Mac that can be repaired, repair it as much as possible to keep it running. If it is completely dead and there's no way to fix it, but if, like Bruce said, if you have let's say you have a case, but the insides are dead and somebody else has the insides that are good, but the case is crap, get them together, make one good one, do that. But I don't see a problem with repurposing for other things like what I'm going to do with that Mac Pro 1,1. I'm going to do a PC, maybe a Hackintosh with it. Who knows? But
At the end of the day, it's their stuff, We look at
Exactly.
it as collectors and we sort of go, oh, that's terrible, it's sacrilegious and all that. And, I get that totally. But at the end of the day, if you own it,
It's
it's your
yours.
stuff and you want to pull it apart and turn it into a fish tank,
by all means,
you're
yeah.
perfectly, you got the rights to. I mean, we can whinge about it, but, it's not ours.
Yep, exactly. All right, so I guess we can move on to our next topic. So now we're going to go into, these are basically our two user topics we picked from all you guys from last week's episode. We got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think it's 5 topics that we picked 2 of them that we're going to talk about tonight. The first one, age-old argument: why are Macs better than PCs? And I will let Rocky go first on this one.
I love that.
Yes.
Very simple 2-part answer. The first part is their OS, hands down, trounces everything that's out there. Their hardware, Apple has always done a good job of melding hardware together in a cohesive combination. The reason that when I did build PCs custom, that I built very good ones, is I based them on the same philosophy that Apple built machines. Everything works together and they work well together. So those are my 2 points of why I feel that Apple is better than PCs.
Well, I'll go a little bit further on that, is because I was a PC guy up until about 2011. Okay, I had just bought my first iPhone, which was the iPhone 3G or 3G, not 3GS. The 3G was my first iPhone. I loved the thing. So then who is that making all that noise in the background?
Steve.
All I hear is.
I'm muted.
So, anyways, I started out in 2011 as a late bloomer. Now, I did use Apples back in high school. We had an Apple II for typing and stuff, but that's about my extent of touching Apples back before then. But when I first really got into Macs was 2011. So I bought my first one, and Jay's going to go roll his eyes at this, but I bought a MacBook Air, okay, the 2011 MacBook Air. And that was my first use of the Mac OS operating system, the modern version. OS 10, and I fell in love with it because back then Windows 7 was the actual operating system under Windows, which was a very good one. Don't get me wrong. Windows 7 is probably Windows' best operating system they ever came out with. However,
Windows 7 is actually really good.
However, Mac OS was a lot easier. The learning curve, a lot of people think the learning curve is bad, but the learning curve on Mac OS was really, really short. It was not, it didn't take me long at all to figure things out and how to use stuff. That's one of the things we could say about Steve Jobs is he wanted to make things simple and easy to use. And that was his philosophy with a lot of stuff that came from Apple. He wanted it to be simple, and it, as he said, it just works. Okay. So that was my first foray into it. So ever since then, I've basically been using Macs. I pretty much purged myself of PCs. I do not own a PC at all in my house. My wife used to use PCs. She no longer does. She uses Macs. So, we don't have any now I do run, now this is sacrilegious. I do run Windows 10 on my Mac Pro, but it is Apple hardware. Okay. Because I have, when I game on it, because the game only runs in Windows. They don't have a Mac version, which the next topic is what we'll get into that. So, so Steve, what about what's your?
Yeah, it's the marriage of the hardware and the software and just how it's tightly controlled. And yes, we all complain about it sometimes because Apple doesn't let you do this or Apple doesn't let you do that or the iPhone is closed off or blah, 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 blah. But I think that's what makes the experience probably best. But what I have to say also is the PC hardware isn't necessarily bad. The processors and the parts and stuff you could buy aren't necessarily bad at all because a lot of those parts you could find in your Mac in one way or another. What is bad is a lot of the cheapo end hardware that companies like HP and Compaq and Dell try and shovel towards consumers. I completely view the hardware and the software as completely two different things because I could run Windows on a Mac and it would run pretty well because the hardware is pretty good as long as the software is aware of all that. The bells and whistles and the drivers and everything, it can run perfect. I've run Boot Camp since it came out because I wanted to play games on my 2006 iMac, and that's what I did. But a lot of the PC hardware out there, it's made cheap. They cut corners everywhere. Not that Apple doesn't, but look at the early Pentium 4 laptops by Toshiba. You see the heatsink is basically sticking out of the back of the unit, like. Who thought that was a good design decision? So I completely think that there are issues, of course, with PC hardware, especially low-end stuff. Now, some high-end stuff is really, really nice, and of course, I would not object to having a very nice, souped-up new AMD or Intel system or whatever with whatever graphics card flavor of the week you want to pop in there. I could care less. Give me some good hardware that works, and I don't care where it's coming from. But as far as Apple, I think the operating system is really the key for it, and that's why I can't really be productive on any other system. I've tried at work. I just always eventually get a Mac, and I just, I whiz around things. I'm like doing keyboard command shortcuts. People are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm Command Q, Command, blah, 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 like just like whizzing around. And, I think it just suits me well. Everyone's a little different, but that's just my opinion.
What you mentioned that, Steve, and I get on a PC nowadays, and I want to hit Command C now and Command V.
It's my biggest problem.
I always forget. Oh, that's Control on a Windows.
On my laptop at my old job, it was a ThinkPad, and the function and the control keys were in the swap position where it was on a Mac. Thankfully, in the BIOS, you could swap it. So I did, and I put little labels over the keys. I remember one of the little, printout labels over the keys. I remember one of the Apple system administrators, because I couldn't have a Mac due to the software I needed. One of the Apple system administrators like, "Oh, you poor SOB, like you're so used to this keyboard layout." I'm like, "Yep." And he used a Mac, so he knew. But that's thankfully there was the option for it.
Yep. Steve or Bruce, what about you?
I'm in a job that, look, at the end of the day these days, most of us can work with either. You're not in a situation where you sort of have to work with one or the other unless you're dependent on specific software. Because these days, there's software online, and I'm a web developer, which means that I can work on anything, and I prefer to work on a Mac, and that partially comes down to the fact that I've been working with them for a long time. But the other is, as Steve was saying, I'm more productive. If I'm to go down to some of the smaller things, and this is stuff that relates right back to when I used to work in a design studio, I love being able to do things like get, curly quotes with, with just a couple of, sort of extra keys instead of having to put in very complicated key combinations. I've just always liked kind of working with the Mac operating system. It's just always been so much more sort of, I think, cohesive, and I can just be way more productive. So it's a tool at the end of the day, and it's whichever tool that you're most productive on, and that's the Mac.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Mike, how about you? I know you've been a Mac user since day one, right?
Well, maybe not day one. I'd say about 1986.
Oh, so before Macs.
But I also had I actually had a PC before. My first computer was actually a PC. My very, very first computer my dad bought was a PC. He hated Macs. He thought they were the Antichrist. So, because he enjoyed sitting there in DOS and typing out a bunch of cryptic commands that nobody in their right mind could understand. But hey, that's his problem.
Yeah.
But being around PCs and Macs as long as I have, it's oh my god, it's like night and day. My biggest reason for using Macs is for the simple fact that I don't have to pay $3.99 for the operating system. I don't have to reactivate said operating system every time I upgrade the memory or change a bad hard drive or install a USB device because. What the hell? Oh, so he's got a cuckoo clock.
That's me.
Oh, okay. Well, your cuckoo's
Yeah, it's
going
9
nuts.
o'clock.
And the fact that basically I don't have to be forced to upgrade, the operating system works just as well as a new one does. Actually, I think the 10-year-old one works better than the new one does personally. But that's just me. And I have 86 every PC from my life, with the exception of a laptop that I have to carry around for doing computer work that I do on the side, and another laptop that I just turned on for the first time in 3 years because I had to program my phone system at work. So it took 5.5 hours to update it, thanks to Microshaft and Windows 10 and all that crap.
Damn.
And yeah, because it wouldn't even let me. It was so bad. I couldn't even use the machine. It wouldn't even let me in. It says your version of Windows is out of date. You must update.
Update this.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I use my Mac laptops all the time, or my Mac. I have a Mac Pro here. I have a Mac Mini and several Pros at work. And my wife never uses a computer. She uses her phone all the time. So it's been sitting there collecting dust for a couple of years. I turn it on to do 5 minutes worth of programming on my phone system. I have to wait 5 hours before I can even do that. So therefore, that's the reason I use the Mac. Unfortunately, I have to have the PC for the phones because Avaya just refuses to make their software for Mac OS.
Yeah, there's always going to be those holdouts.
Let's see, Grudy.
And I can understand why. I mean, the professional world uses PC.
Yeah.
My professional world is anti-PC.
And what about you,
Yeah.
Grudy?
Well, I was born and raised, other than Dad's Mac Plus, I was born and raised on PC. And I still see the value of PC for a certain degree. All my Intel Macs, except for a handful of them, actually run Windows 10. Even the ones that don't support Windows 10 run Windows 10. It's okay. But I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to forget the shortcuts and stuff to Windows 10. And I'm so used to the Mac keyboard layout now that, I too also hit the wrong buttons for command and control, and well, there's no command on Windows, but still. Sorry if I sound a little messed up. I'm 7 shots in right now. But anyway, yeah, Windows it's still useful for certain things. I still fold 24/7 on Windows because it's better than on Mac. And I do still game on Windows, but other than that, every single thing I do is on Mac OS, including video editing, Photoshop, etc., etc. It's all on Mac OS. So, but when we're getting to the point of which is better, Mac hardware has always been better to a certain degree, except for cooling for some systems. It can be lacking on some systems, but other than that, they usually use really high-end quality stuff. Where, like, I think it was Rocky was talking about HP and stuff. I haven't had a good tower from HP since 2002ish, because they just cut corners on everything. Although they're professional systems, like the workstation systems, they're rock solid. Their consumer systems suck, and they break all the time. My very first quad-core PC worked for about 3 months. It was an HP. And it ended up having problems, and the hard drive went out on it, and it was a nightmare. And once I switched over to Mac, even though my newest Mac is this 2014 Mini here, which I'm streaming off of. Other than that, my newest Mac's actually a 2012 model MacBook, which Colin screwed up. We won't go into that. So my newest Mac is like 2011 model.
Well, I wouldn't say he screwed it up. He probably screwed it because you wanted him to do something that it was never designed to do.
Yeah, you could have just left it alone.
A CPU upgrade.
A Grudy can never leave the machine alone.
He couldn't get the CPU to stick to it. But we won't go into that because he's still trying to fix it. I actually sent him another board so he could fix it, but still. Other than that...
So you're enabling him.
Yeah,
I just want to get that straight.
Oh, yeah, I forgot my late 2012 Mini is actually my second newest. So anyway, I only go up to about 2012, but there's very useful. Any Intel system I have, Mac-wise, works. It just works, especially with Windows. With the right drivers, it just works, So hardware quality, it's like I build new PC systems every once in a while. As long as you buy high-end hardware, it will last years. I have a system that was built in late 2006, I think. It's still running folding 24/7 upstairs. But if you're talking about low-end hardware, like the crap the HP puts into a system or the low-end Dell systems, it's not going to last a few years. Where Macs, unless it's the cooling problems, tend to last for a very, 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 very long time. So it's debatable which one's better.
Okay. Dysfunctional or Starbuck Tech goes, you all have way too many Macs. LOL. I'm happy with my single 2009 Mac Pro. You can never have too many Macs.
Exactly. I'm up to
significant others. Yes, you can.
Well, yeah.
I'm up to I think 109.
Still ain't
now.
beating Steve.
Jeez.
It's true. I'm getting close.
There's one thing we haven't said about the Apple operating system and Apple in general that makes them superior is the software. Because honestly, it's coded better, it runs better, and there was to give an example, there was a video where iJustine had a competition with the top editor.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Linus Tech Tips.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah, and she kicked his ass. So, there's something to be said for the fact not only do they do a good job of hardware cohesion and a very well-made operating system, but it shines through in how well made the applications
Yes.
are as well, because they do have a tight tolerance on that.
To be honest with you, if I had had a few more years with my dad, I think I would have been able to convert him to Mac, and he would have been a lot happier. But I didn't have that much time.
With Mac comes joy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well said.
And I didn't believe that until I actually started really
And
using
same
them.
here. And like I said, when I started collecting some older Macs, like the lampshade behind me here, that one, I like the looks of it, and it still operates. The only thing I pretty much use it for now is basically a music server. It plays music because it plays it wonderfully on those nice Pro speakers I got from Mike. So
Nice.
Glad somebody's using them.
Yep. So, but anyways, that's our topic on this. Now we're going to transition a little bit because I did mention a little bit of something about, why Macs are superior, but they're not superior in one area, and that is gaming. Okay.
Yes.
Older Macs, however, I feel are superior. Like the Power PC and stuff. Back in the day
68K.
when they used to run or write games specifically for the Power PC and stuff like that. However, when they switched to Intel, the Mac gaming kind of died off. There really is no good games per se for a Mac.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I mentioned earlier that I run Windows on another hard drive in my system, or SSD.
Exactly.
Is because when I do iRacing, it does not have a Mac client. Now, they used to actually have a Mac client.
They used to, yep.
They used to have a Mac client. However, when they switched over to DX11 from DX9, okay, because DX9 was actually supported in Mac OS. DX11,
Oh, is it?
yeah, DX11.
Really? I didn't know that.
DX11 was not, and Mac was, and Apple was never going to support it. Okay, so when they recoded their software to run with the newest DX11, basically Macs were out, so they couldn't run it anymore. So I actually ran iRacing for a while with the Mac. I mean, it was actually worse on a Mac than it was on me running under the same hardware under Windows. It ran.
What Mac were you running it on?
Back then, I was running on a 2012 iMac.
See, that's also the issue because the iMac is not using the full-fledged graphics card; it's using a mobility version usually.
No.
So.
But here's the thing: when I ran it with the Windows version, it was perfect. It ran perfect. When I ran it,
No, what I'm saying is, yeah, drivers on Windows usually take a little more advantage and don't really care about the thermals
Yeah,
as much.
but you
as the
got to
Apple
remember, Steve, that the system itself, iRacing was originally based off of NASCAR Racing 2003 season,
Papyrus.
And you
Which
say you
is,
got to remember. How would I know that?
which is from 2002. So it's anything can basically run it.
Yeah. But the problem is that a lot of the games coming out today are PC based or Windows based. So you have to have a good Windows system in order to run a lot of the PC games out there today. That's a fact of life. And to be honest with you, I don't think Macs are ever going to get a foothold in the gaming sector.
I think Apple devices have with the iPhone and the iPad. They definitely have a huge grip on
That
on
I could
casual
see,
gaming.
but-
And,
Yes,
and,
I agree.
I agree
but
with you on that.
Mac.
But with the
oh no,
Mac,
of course,
reason-
I agree completely.
yep.
The
Yeah.
reason that Macs don't have a foothold in the gaming market is because their market saturation is only like 2%.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So
publishers don't see it.
So
Why
it's one of
develop
those things
for
that
it?
exactly. Now,
Yeah, I mean, if the
whoever
developers
says there
thought they
aren't
could
games,
make money,
yeah, but whoever says there aren't games for Mac aren't looking hard enough. I play games on mine all the time. It depends on what you want to play. Now, like you're not going to find the latest Skyrim game or anything like. Or actually, I don't know. Maybe you have. I just never looked.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, some of the big ones are, but yeah, Mike, I totally agree. You're not going to find like every single latest and greatest version for the Mac.
yeah, I mean, I have no problems finding games that I enjoy playing that run on my Mac just fine. And truthfully, some of the games that I have that run on Macs and PCs. They run on Macs with much less requirements, 10 times better than they do on PCs with 3 times the requirements, especially in the graphics department. I can do more on a Mac with a 1 gig video card than I can on a PC with an 8 gig video card. That's pathetic.
Yeah.
So that's the primary reason there aren't games, and it's been like that since day one.
But I mean,
People,
well, here's the thing.
No.
Okay, I liberated this because somebody was going to throw this away. It's a Hoyle card game. Now, this is a PC and Mac version on here. Okay, I think this came out in 2000. Crap, I don't even know what date it came out.
What I found interesting about that
2010.
GT,
But
what I found interesting about your game though is it's not universal.
no,
Well, it came out in 2010. Why would it be?
yeah,
Yeah, but it supports Tiger and Leopard.
but
yeah, well,
Tiger on Intel.
They're probably using. Remember that Cider or whatever it was called? They used that to port a lot of these PC games to early Intel Macs. I would not be surprised if they developed that for Windows and just used a technology similar to that to port it over. You know, games like Spore and other popular titles like that used those technologies because it was much cheaper than developing the whole thing for the Mac.
True.
Yeah. And you got to remember that the PowerPC basically went out the window, what, 2006, 7?
Six was the nail in the coffin, but on
Yeah.
5 it was announced. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that was one of the biggest problems with the G5. It was a very good machine. However, only 2 operating systems were it could ever run on it was Tiger and Leopard. And that was it. I mean, Apple, that was probably the only machine that Apple did not support long time. Whereas you get, like, for instance, my 2009 was supported all the way through Mojave natively. Okay.
Right.
But, you know,
Wait a minute.
yes.
High
No.
Sierra. 2009, yeah, High
No.
Sierra.
I
Yeah.
could put Mojave on it without any patchers.
I thought you were talking about your iMac. Sorry.
No, I'm talking about
the Mac Pro. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, I am running Catalina on it now, but I have to run a patcher to run Catalina because
Yeah.
even though Catalina runs perfect on a Mac Pro, so I don't know why Apple. Well, I know why they do it because they want to sell more hardware. Because the longer they try to keep stuff going, the more it's going to cost, or the more they're not going to sell. So, you know, is people going to keep their hardware? Because they know people like us are going to keep this old hardware running and going. So, but getting back to our topic, though, gaming, I think, was not one of Apple's biggest, what I want to think, what's the word I'm looking for?
Steve Jobs even
Prioritize
said
it, yeah.
that he did not want to promote Apple gaming. He didn't want to promote gaming. Steve Jobs said that himself.
Now,
He was
Even though
against
that 80% of the Apple II's used was for gaming, but you know, back in the 68K days, I mean, there were thousands of games available for the Macs because back then the Mac was 1,000 times better graphically and speed-wise than a PC. But now they're about equal if you really think about it.
Yeah, the hardware is so similar these days.
That's right.
But the other problem is in terms of gaming is the fact that in order for you to have a good gaming rig on a Mac, you got to have a Pro.
mm-hmm.
Exactly.
The real high-end video
Has to
card,
be a Pro.
all the memory, you know, all that stuff, you know. And the biggest thing that home users are buying are iMacs, which are basically a Mac Pro with, well, it's actually basically I should say it's not a Mac Pro. It's basically a laptop
crammed into
with
a big display.
a big screen.
Yeah.
So the hard drives are slow, the memory is slow, and it's limited. You can only put, you know, you can't upgrade the video on most of them. I know there's a few you can, but still, the GPUs are going to be limited to what's available, and most of them are just mobile versions, like Greg said. that have been adapted for the desktop. So I think that's the primary reason that because gaming is not a professional thing, so people aren't going to buy a professional computer to play. I don't know, whatever's hot now. I don't even follow the gaming scene anymore. I just play Minecraft. Minecraft is anal and puzzle based and everything else. So stuff that people don't want to play anyway.
I could never see the appeal of Minecraft, honestly.
Neither could I. My son used to play it all the time, but
it's a fun.
If there was a market, they would make games.
Even when it was new in college, I had no clue why my friend from college played it, because I'm a graphics guy, and it being all blocky just drove me crazy.
Well, that was the whole thing of it. It was supposed to look like an 8-bit,
Yeah. But
there is some hope on the horizon for Apple, though, as well as Linux, that companies like Valve are making compatibility layers, because honestly, love it or hate it, Mac OS is BSD. So at its core, it's still one of the Unix variants. And therefore, Valve latched onto that, and they're creating their own kind of utilities and tools to port over stuff that has been traditionally ran on Windows. They're porting it to Mac, they're porting it to Linux, and they're making it, they're using a Wine-like emulator, stuff like that, but they're going a step beyond that. They're pushing really hard to kind of port all that over to Mac and Linux and really kind of push away from Windows on that, because it's honestly, they've even proven it a better environment for games, because the hardware is not as held back and restricted by the operating system's bloat and garbage, as we've already said. macOS is not bloated to the degree of Windows. Linux is not bloated. So there's hope on the horizon.
The thing about the gaming on a Mac too is that, like you just said, the graphics drivers on a Mac are so basic. They're very basic, okay? Whereas you get Windows when you have DX11 or DX12 even now, which is basically made for gaming. In fact, they even shoved in Xbox into the Windows operating system. So it's part of the Windows operating system now.
Right, GT, and like what you say, for instance, with Fermi systems, the Fermi does not support Metal, but it supports DX12.
So, that's the biggest problem. And, the graphics card I have in this thing now runs circles around the Mac in Mac OS, but it runs circles around it when it's running in Windows.
Right.
Because I can actually update the drivers when AMD puts out new driver updates. Whereas Mac doesn't really update their drivers hardly, if ever. And if you ever use Boot Camp, which I don't recommend ever doing Boot Camp, if you ever do Windows on a Mac, do it on a separate hard drive. Install it as its own operating system. You can still dual boot if you have a boot picker screen or a graphic card that still will do EFI, or it's an Apple flashed one. But do it on a separate hard drive, because it's much easier to get it installed that way and to work. Because, again, all the drivers that come with Boot Camp are old. Okay?
Very old.
And a lot of them will not work with modern graphics cards. So that's one of the biggest reasons why I game with Windows on my Mac software or hardware.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because when I'm racing and I tell these guys that I'm running this on a 2009 Mac, they can't believe it. And I tell them, I got all the graphics turned all the way up pretty much. And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, and I'm running a ultra wide display here, a gaming monitor, and it runs it fine, 144 megahertz, so go figure."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
go ahead,
used to.
Steve.
I used to play, the Steam games as soon as they came out on my 2006 iMac, and I used to in Counter Strike you could spray a graphic, like, hey, this is my territory, and mine was an iMac, and I'm like, I play on a Mac or whatever the heck I made the thing say or whatever. But I mean, that as Rocky was saying, Valve, saw that there was a market. Maybe it wasn't a huge market, but they saw there was a market for their games on the Macintosh platform. And they made an awesome decision to have their Steam platform on the Mac. So, yeah, you got to develop your game in a smart way so it's not a pain to port it, or you could use tools to do that or whatever. But that's been a huge shot in the arm for the Macintosh gaming community. There is one. It's not as big as the PC one, but it's nice to know that we're not totally neglected.
Yep.
I would say Steam has a really, really good collection of games for the Mac. But
Yeah,
once
even some
again,
vintage ones.
it's going to be stuff that you're going to have to look. You're not going to find the latest and greatest 3D shooters and stuff like that, But then again, the Macs pretty much aren't going to run them anyway, and a lot of guys are probably going to run those on consoles either way.
Yeah, and
Or
the
PC.
biggest thing that I say makes PC gaming better is you look at the software compatibility. I could run a DOS game, I could run a Windows 95 game, I could run a Windows XP game most of the time, depending on the game, on a modern Windows system. Where on a Mac, all right, you got 68K, you got Mac OS Classic, you got PowerPC OS 10 code. There's so many forks there that to run an old Mac game, you need old hardware, which is, I think, one of the reasons why we tend to stick around with our old hardware.
Exactly.
Well,
And
that's something that's kind of bit Apple in the butt ever since the PowerPC originally came out, because Windows. I shouldn't say it's not Windows. Intel itself has maintained 8088 functionality in every single processor they've ever made up to today. So in theory, on a PC or even a Mac running PC Boot Camp, should be able to run anything that was made in 1981 today. And unfortunately, Apple doesn't do that. They did it with OS up to 9, and very early versions of 10. You could still run some 68K software, but after they canceled the G5, they pretty much said, "Oh well, screw it, we're not going to do it anymore." Which locked out people from a lot of good games. I mean, I used to love playing games on my 68K Mac.
Oh yeah,
like Marathon, which I still haven't played.
Yeah.
Oh geez, we need a marathon.
I have a copy.
I have my copy on floppies.
But the one thing, this is not related to gaming, but the one thing that I do like about Mac is they supported drivers for GPUs for a lot longer than PC did. So, for instance, the HD 4000 was supported all the way through High Sierra natively, where it was cut off in I think it was 2013 in PC. So, yeah.
All right, guys.
But those driver things, they have to do more with the company, not the OS, honestly.
True, but Apple still had to approve it.
Not for a PC, though. Not for Windows.
Exactly.
So that's the difference between...
Well, Apple's operating system is so closed off to everybody, it's not even funny, unlike Windows. Microsoft will just basically say, "Oh, okay, you want to do something for Windows? Oh, okay, here you go. We'll just throw you the source code."
They're like a doorknob. Everybody has their turn.
Yeah, and mentioning that just before you cut us off,
Apple,
before you cut us off,
with Apple, you want to do something with their operating system. And say, well, you could give me your firstborn and your left leg, and then we might think about letting you know what the operating system is.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the graphics drivers, I think also what everyone said, you get more options on the PC. You get scaling options, all these options you just never get on a Mac, not for a longest time. So I think that's neat. So play your games over.
And there's a lot more flexibility on a PC, too, in terms of hardware and stuff like that. Unfortunately, the operating system sucks.
Yep.
I think that's something we can all agree on.
I agree. All right, so... Looks like we are down to we're going to finish on time tonight, guys. So, hey,
Oh,
Imagine
damn,
that.
on. We
Now
got
you
more
think
time.
Imagine that.
Wow.
All right, guys. So make sure if you want to after the show tonight, some of us will be on Discord. This is our new Discord link that's showing up there. If you want to go ahead and join us there, if you have not been there before, you will be in a channel all by your lonesome. You have to read something and then you have to do something in order to get more access. So make sure you read that stuff. And make sure you do exactly what you're supposed to do so we know that you read it.
Yeah. Unlike a Mac, you do actually have to read
Yeah.
the manual.
Make sure you hit that like button. If you like this content, we'll keep it going. We're going to, like I said, we're doing a new thing where we're going to try to keep it about an hour and a half now. And we're going to be doing the news up front now. I like that a little bit better, I think, guys, putting the news up front and then going into our topics. So
Yeah, I agree.
I honestly do like the news up front
Yes.
first, but I still think we could do 2 hours.
Oh, we can do 8 hours.
I had a sneaky suspicion you were going to say that.
but we're not going to do it tonight, fortunately. So
So after an hour and a half, we all sign off, and it's just
Yeah.
Grudy talking to everybody else.
well,
Yeah.
actually, I want to be Grudy because I'll
Grudy
cut
after
the stream
dark.
off because I'm the one running the stream. So he'll be talking to himself. So guys, go ahead and join us there. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. We only do this once a week, so you're not going to get a whole bunch of alerts. I know I got my alert as soon as I hit the live button on here. An alert popped up on my iPad saying, hey, we're live. So it's actually working for a change, which is surprising. So, guys, thank you guys for being here. And
Follow us
yeah,
on Twitter.
follow us on Twitter. We need that Twitter link unless you got it up in there.
I'm putting it in there right now.
So go ahead and follow us on Twitter and check out all of our channels too as well. So check us all out, and we'll see you guys, I guess, later on in the
Channel links are in the description.
yeah. So we'll see you guys later. You guys have a great night, and see you next Thursday. Bye.
See you
ya.
guys.
Hello.
No, no.